I would now like to introduce Professor Tony Haymet, Australia's Chief Scientist. In addition to holding the role of Australia's Chief Scientist, Professor Haymet is a lifelong advocate for oceans, science, innovation and discovery as a way to inspire and create change around us. An ATSE Fellow and distinguished leader in Australian science, he is helping guide the nation's future science endeavours. Please welcome Professor Tony Haymet.
Good morning. Welcome. Thank you, Michaela. That's a hard act to follow. Two hard acts to follow. Wonderful artwork and the announcement of beginning of negotiations with the European Commission. But I'll do my best to make it interesting. I'm very pleased to be at this symposium to see its strong focus on collaborative efforts to secure a more sustainable future. As Chief Scientist, I echo the warm welcome to you all, and especially those who've travelled from overseas. Thank you to Minister Tim Ayres for your insightful remarks, and I'm glad to see today, I'll see some former Ministers for Science, Ed Husic, I think later. Let me acknowledge the Honourable Karen Andrews, whom I met in Canberra several times. She reminded me that many of the structures that I find so helpful in my job were invented during her time as Minister for Science. I also like to acknowledge the Ambassador from the EU, who I see far too often in Canberra, usually at the best receptions. Yours on the 9th of May, I have to admit, was the best so far. I'm keeping score. We do meet on Aboriginal land, and I acknowledge the warm welcome from Joseph and the thank you that Michaela gave on behalf of all of us to that welcome. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to being accompanying the Minister over the next couple of months as he makes some really important announcements about Torres Strait Islander and Aboriginal knowledge systems. We were invited to think about the year 2075, and it is a very important year for me. I hadn't prepared it for my speech, but I was reminded by an earlier speech talking about rugby league and the NRL that the year 2075 will be the 106th year since my beloved Balmain Tigers won the NRL Premiership, and I'm hoping I don't have to wait till 2075 for that to happen again. It was great to hear Margaret Thatcher's name raised too. As many of you will know from the engineering community, Mrs. Thatcher had a master's degree in spectroscopy, chemist. So she immediately knew the danger of climate change, as anyone who understands the vibrational spectrum of CO2 would do. Unfortunately, it's not a requirement to be part of Australia's Parliament to have a degree in spectroscopy. More's the pity. I commend this conference for exploring the profound contribution to science of First Nations knowledge systems. In fact, elevating the knowledge systems of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples is one of the Australian government's 5 national science and research priorities, and if you see it in diagrammatic form, it's the one that sits in the heart of the other 4. The people in this audience come from many parts of Australia and many countries. I've met quite a few people already that I've met in earlier parts of my life. Welcome to you all. Many of you are among the most highly accomplished in your fields, and all of you come from countries grappling with issues relating to sustainability. So it's fitting that I've been asked to speak to you today about the role of international science collaboration in delivering a sustainable future. And if I may, I'd like to reflect a bit on my own journey. I want to tell you a story about stories. When I was a kid growing up in Sydney, in the then modest suburb of Lane Cove, the shelves of Lane Cove Library, still a great library, were full of romanticised stories celebrating the heroics of great scientific individuals. Figures whose singular vision and seemingly solo efforts led to great scientific breakthroughs. But the library books of today present a much more balanced and accurate view. They reflect what I've learned over the decades and what you also know, that nearly all innovation relies on collaboration. Science and engineering are team sports, and more often than not, they're global ones. In the face of complex international challenges, collaboration in science and engineering has never been more vital. The problems we face are now too big and too complex for countries to go it alone, and we can't solve them in silos. Sea levels are rising, and we're dealing with more frequent and more intense bushfires, heat waves, flooding, and droughts. I used to say that just about Australia, but now I look to Europe and see exactly the same problems happening. Stabilising the climate will eventually limit sea level rise increases and reduce the likelihood of extreme weather. This helps to safeguard the health and well-being of people, ecosystems, and economies. So it's crucial for our planet, its people, and our grandchildren that we stabilise the climate. And you too are crucial as people, as engineers, as scientists. We are switching from an energy system that is high in CO2 emissions to one that is cleaner and fundamentally more sustainable. We are decarbonising our economy by finding new ways to create energy, to store energy, and to deliver that energy to people who need it. Scientific and technological breakthroughs over the next decade will be essential for decarbonising our economies, boosting sovereign capability, protecting the environment, and increasing our productivity and prosperity. To achieve these goals, international science and engineering partnerships will be more important than ever before. Fortunately, collaboration is part of our scientific DNA in Australia. In fact, our Academy of Science reckons that the last major Australian invention that did not involve some international input was the stump jump plough. If you've never heard of that before, it's an Aussie icon. Please look it up with Mr. Google. That was invented, I'm told, in 1876, just when I was starting my career. Throughout my career, I've often collaborated with overseas individuals and organisations, and I've spent some years of my life, my professional life, happily overseas. Australians are also good collaborators when it comes to translating scientific discoveries into game-changing real-world innovations. And I hope you don't mind if I mention a few. Wi-Fi, the cervical cancer vaccine Gardasil, the black box flight recorder, actually orange, and the cochlear hearing implant, to name just a few. Despite having just 0.33% of the global population, we produce about 5% of the world's most cited research papers. This places us among the top 5 nations in the world. However, that paper success, that publication success, is not sufficiently mirrored when it comes to consistently translating research into commercial outcome within our borders. Australians must turn more of that world-class research into world-leading industries, products and services. And to do that onshore, we must often cooperate with those who are offshore. That helps us pool our knowledge, share resources, and scale up discoveries. We understand if we produce 5% of research, that means there's 95% that we're importing from other countries. The cross-pollination of ideas across continents is vital to science, research, and engineering. Early in my career, I lived and worked abroad, collaborating with teams in different countries and tapping into new ways of thinking. That experience shaped my path and fueled my progress. Such scientific mobility fosters enduring collaborations that span decades and continents. And that's why supporting scientific mobility matters so much. We need to help more researchers gain international experience. And we need to get them mobile early, just as I did, so they're ready to contribute to the global challenges ahead. I'm glad the Minister mentioned so clearly that high numbers of our top scientists and engineers were born overseas, many of you here today. Thank you. This cultural diversity strengthens our domestic workforce and our global connections. For Australia to achieve its ambitions regarding sustainability and prosperity, it needs a scientific workforce that continues to be fit for purpose. We must take care to avoid potential skill shortages in many areas of strategically important science and technology. Our science system requires continued access to resilient pipelines of diverse scientific talent from Australia and abroad. So a few things that we have to continue to do. At school, we must consistently encourage young people to pursue STEM subjects. At university, we must bolster the numbers of domestic PhD graduates. And in the workforce, we must provide greater job certainty for researchers, early career researchers, because job insecurity remains a major barrier for careers in Australia in science. Great science and engineering doesn't just need great people and good job security, it requires great equipment too. And that must include world-leading research infrastructure. Now, in Australia, we've realised when it comes to research infrastructure, we can't have one of everything. We got used long ago to sending our scientists to CERN to smash particles into each other. But we need access to a lot of different facilities in Australia. Some of them in Australia, some of them overseas, many of them in the future probably built with partners. And just as an example of some global infrastructure that is partly in Australia, the Square Kilometre Array, or SKA. I remember this project when I first joined CSIRO in 2002. And it was an amazing project, collaborating across the world, bringing partners together to build an amazing telescope. That telescope is beginning to operate. It's partly in Western Australia, the west of Australia, partly in South Africa. It's a great example. It's incredibly expensive, but it's a great example of international collaboration with facilities in Australia, South Africa, and the UK. So let me finish with a few takeaway messages. We're in the middle of a digital revolution, unlocking extraordinary capabilities at a time of extraordinary global challenges and change. Across Australia and many other nations, there's a rare alignment of technology, ambition, shared goals, especially around climate change. These challenges regarding climate, as well as health and sustainability, are global, and so too must the solutions to them be global. That's why international partnerships matter, why shared infrastructure and researcher mobility are essential, and why your discussions here are so important. However, collaboration must not end at conference doors. I urge you to take what you learn here and turn it into action in your labs and offices, your institutions, and your policy networks. As Australia's Chief Scientist, I'm committed to fostering international collaboration in science and research. And I want to finish with my favourite quote that unfortunately some of you have heard before, and that's from Louis Pasteur, which I read in that local library I mentioned earlier. Science knows no country because knowledge belongs to humanity and is the torch which illuminates the world. Thank you.